My name is Neha Jain. I'm a professor at Northwestern University at the Pritzker School of Law, and I'm also a faculty fellow at the Buffett Institute at Northwestern. I used to be a professor at the European University Institute, and I still retain an affiliation there as a part-time professor and as the co-director of the Academy of European Law. So my presentation today for the Max Planck Law Annual Conference is on the migration crisis. The title of the presentation is "The Law is Dead, Long Live the Market, Confronting Migration's Permacrisis." And the idea came to me because of a recent slogan that the UNHCR came up with, which was the fact that migrants or migration is not the crisis. It is the narratives that we tell about them. So the presentation tries to unpack what the narratives about the migration crisis have been and how they represent a crisis of the law and not simply a crisis of migration or migrants. And so the idea is that historically, migration was viewed through the lens of arrangements that states have to come up with, laws, regulations that states have to come up with to try and manage borders and their sovereignty and border arrangements. Whereas now you have a different force added onto law, which is marketized asylum arrangements. And so migration is no longer seen as something that's the provenance of international refugee law. Instead, you have migration being talked about in terms of barters and economic and development partnerships and exchanges. And this marketized asylum policy, I argue, is not simply something that is being put forward by cynical or xenophobic governments, but is actually embedded in the structure of international refugee law. International law has been called a discipline of crisis, which means international lawyers, by definition, are crisis mongers, crisis entrepreneurs, crisis managers. And so the discipline of international law has been enmeshed in crisis in the way it's conceived. Initially, traditionally, the phenomenon used to be on what is being observed, so the phenomenon that is being labeled a crisis, whereas now the focus is on who's doing the observing. So what does it mean to see something in crisis terms? For example, James Scott, in his classic work, Seeing Like a State, had said that what it means to see like a state is to see in terms of categorization and standardization as a way to resolve social problems. And to see like an international lawyer means to see in terms of crises. And in that sense, a crisis will always be a political phenomenon as well as a legal phenomenon, at least for an international lawyer. I actually have my own history as an academic is tied to the Max Planck Society. I spent 2 years at the Max Planck in Freiburg when I was still doing my doctorate in the UK. What I think has changed and what I see in this conference is that the different Max Planck institutes that used to be a lot more siloed are no longer viewed as separate entities. And so the wonderful thing about this initiative is that if you're a young researcher or not even so young as a researcher, there seems to be much more of an effort to connect what people are doing across the different Max Planck institutes and to give them the opportunities to meet each other. Because ultimately that's what academia thrives on. It's on personal exchange, which is what leads to intellectual exchange. You can't have one without the other. And I see that as a really wonderful initiative.